reading. But if you're paying attention, we are in our study of Proverbs, and this is week 3 of our study, and you have had a reading assignment to read a chapter of Proverbs each week, and the chapter each day. And each day, the proverb you're supposed to read is the number of the day of the month that you're on. So today being the 8th, we read the 8th proverb. So it all works out. But yes, thank you for that. If you have your Bible there in Proverbs, turn to Proverbs 1. That's where we're going to be next. So what I'm trying to do in these first few weeks, 3 weeks of this series is to give you an overview. So for you to get a sense of not only how Proverbs works, but how wisdom works, but also, we want to understand the concept better. We just want to understand wisdom and Proverbs and, just get a lay of the land here. My assumption really is that you've been in Proverbs before. You've dipped into Proverbs many times over the course of your life in, Bible studies or Bible classes or just, studying your own when you're reading through the Bible. But you might have not ever thought about it or stepped back to look at the message of Proverbs. There is practical wisdom in Proverbs. But there's more than that. There's also theological wisdom in Proverbs. And theological, that just means talking about God, so that understanding and studying about God. And so the first 3 weeks of this series, I've been focused on the theological nature of wisdom, about God that we find in Proverbs. Now, some of you have been out to where my family and I live. We live on the edge of town, and there is, next to our driveway, it used to be down the road a couple feet, but they redid the driveway a little bit, and now it's on the right side of my driveway, looking out. Little sign, right by my driveway, that says 25 miles an hour. And we constantly see people going by our house at, more than twice that speed. Sometimes we hit a really great treat. We get some entertainment, it's free to us, where the local authorities sit across from our house at this little road and this little street there, and they see the same people doing that, going by 55 or 60, and they give them a little reminder, to pay attention to that sign that's next to our driveway. And if you've ever driven, road signs are really important. They're really, really helpful, actually, and they do an important job if you pay attention to them. But as you know, at least those of you who have been driving for a while, or at least paying attention, not all road signs are created equal. They do not all communicate a clear message. If you were to do a Google search or looking for confusing or funny or strange road signs, you come up with this endless stream of real road signs that haven't been photoshopped. Real road signs from across our country or from around the world. And I've collected a few of those, just a couple of them, a few of my favorites this morning to share with you. I love the ones with the mixed or confusing messages. Ones like this. This is a road sign, that when I'm going someplace new, I'm afraid I'm going to see this sign. And that's just, I'm going to go to Chicago. I'm going to, even if I don't see that sign, that's what they all look like to me. Or maybe this one. Just make up your mind, right? Either left or don't go left, but just give me a choice. And I'm not really sure what to do in this situation. You can't back up, you can't go forward, you can't go right or left. I don't know, too late to get crushed or something. I'm not sure what you're there for, but if you're reading through Proverbs, I've already pointed out in the first message that we looked at in Proverbs, that Proverbs at times does give us mixed messages. Especially if you read, multiple Proverbs at a time, not just reading one, but you kind of, read through a chapter or two. I say this, like a while back, we looked at chapter 10, and there was this, this example. Or was it chapter 15? But sometimes it gives mixed messages. A few weeks ago, I showed you, 2 Proverbs and they were side by side. One proverb says, don't engage a fool in his folly, and the next one is engage a fool in his folly. Don't engage a fool or you'll become like him, or you need to engage a fool, and so that he doesn't remain a fool. And it's it's good sound wisdom and advice, but when you read both of those proverbs next to each other, it's in Proverbs 26 those are, and you get two proverbs right next to each other, and they both seem to contradict each other. One says engage a fool in his folly, and the next one says don't do it. So you've got to think about what you're reading there. You have to, should I correct this fool or shouldn't I? Which one is it? And that takes some wisdom. You gotta, it kind of depends on the fool. It depends on the situation that you're in. We talked briefly about that, but that's not the only example in Proverbs. As you're reading through Proverbs, you may notice that there are some Proverbs that say poverty is the result of being lazy. Yeah, you read the proverb and you think to yourself, I got this question, why are poor people poor? Well, some proverbs say that it's because poor people don't work that hard. They don't work, they're lazy, so they're poor. But then you keep reading in Proverbs, and you'll notice that there are proverbs that say poverty is the result of injustice or oppression. You got the same question, well, why are poor people poor? Well, Proverbs says it's because they're being held down. They're being pushed down. They're being taken advantage of by the rich. By the wicked rich, not just, all rich. But the question is, which one is it? Which one is, why are the poor poor? Well, we know that both of those situations can be true in different situations. It just depends. There are these mixed messages in Proverbs that their purpose isn't to confuse us or to frustrate us to the point that we're just beyond control. We just don't know. We're just so frustrated. We don't. Their point isn't to make us walk away saying, I'm never going to get this. I'm never going to be wise. I don't understand. I don't learn anything from Proverbs because it's so confusing. Instead, their purpose is to make us think on a deeper level. Those different proverbs, they invite us into a wrestling match. To wrestle with that, to develop some skills of wisdom, of discernment. So we can think about, we can ponder these different responses to life. We come into a situation and we're like, well, is it this situation where I'm supposed to, or is this situation where I'm not supposed to? And we've already thought about that because we read through the Proverbs. Not all Proverbs are true in all situations. We have to take into account the subtleties, the nuances of specific situations. Very, what's going on in the moment. We have to know what's going on before we can determine the course of action. What might be right today, right now, in this situation, may not be the right thing to do tomorrow with a different person, in a different situation. We have to make choices. We got to pick up on the subtleties. And that's the way wisdom works. Okay, so having beat that to death and having said that not all messages in Proverbs are mixed, though. Some of them are mixed, but not all messages in Proverbs are confusing. Not all the truth we find in Proverbs is wrapped in subtlety and in nuance. There are some messages that we read in Proverbs that leave no doubt. They are in your face, they're absolutely direct, they're black and white, absolutely clear. Just like some road signs are. Like this road sign. Slow down or die. There is no doubt what that sign's message is. And in the same way, there's no doubt what the overall message of Proverbs chapters 1 through 9 is. Proverbs 1 through 9 is that clear. It's that direct. Remember what we said that the target audience for the first 9 chapters of Proverbs is a young man, an adolescent male, who's being instructed by a father or maybe his mother And his father's passing along this instruction that he received from his father. And what the father is saying to his sons, I mean, it boils down to this. The father says to his son, he says, get wisdom. He says, whatever it takes, you got to get some wisdom. That's got to be your number one priority in life, is to get that wisdom. Because wisdom is the secret to living a good, fulfilled, righteous life. Get wisdom. Wisdom won't fail you. And he tells his son, the place to start for your search of wisdom, the place to start is with God. God is the source of all wisdom. And that's why the first 9 chapters of Proverbs are a theological, if I can use that word about that, it's a theological introduction to Proverbs. Because it tells us about God. What we read in chapters 10 through 31 are very practical. There are a bunch of different sayings, there are different insights addressing different situations. It's practical and ethical wisdom in 10 through 31. But that practical and ethical wisdom in chapters 10 through 31 are built on the theological wisdom we find in the first 9 chapters. That's what keeps us from turning Proverbs into just another collection of inspirational self-help sayings. We don't do that. It's more than that. What we've got is a word from the Lord. Because the kind of wisdom that Proverbs teaches is special. It's different. We receive it. When we receive it, we humble ourselves before the Lord. And the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. This is the Father's message to the Son. But the Father, he's not the only one speaking to this young man in chapters 1 through 9. If you've been reading through that this week, you've noticed he's not the only one speaking. Wisdom, who in Proverbs is personified as a woman, also has a few things to say to this young man. And one of Lady Wisdom's favorite titles for this young man, and others like him, is the simple. Or the simple-minded, or the simpleton. In Proverbs, a simpleton, a simple-minded person, is not a negative label. It's not an insult. Today, if you went to school and somebody's like, you simpleton, you'd get offended. You'd take that as an insult. But that's not the way that it is in Proverbs. That's not the way Proverbs uses that. Proverbs, a simpleton is someone who's young, who's naive, who's not 97 years old. It's somebody who's immature, uninformed, easily led astray. Simpletons are ignorant. And that's not a bad word. It's just reality. They don't know what they don't know. This morning, for obvious reasons, there is a higher concentration of simpletons in this room to my left, sitting near the front. It's not an insult. It's just reality, right? Simpletons are young. They're they can be led astray. They can naively be led astray. They don't know yet what they don't know. There's a common wise saying that you've probably heard growing up, that there is no disgrace in being ignorant, not knowing something. The disgrace is staying that way. There's no disgrace in being a simpleton. The disgrace is staying that way, staying a simpleton. Because simpletons, stay that way because a simpleton is gullible. They tend to easily be led astray. There's always a danger of becoming overcome by folly. It's just a danger. It happens. The father is telling his son about something that he witnessed in chapter 7. He says, the simpleton, in chapter 7, he was talking to his son, he says, the simpleton fell into a trap set by an immoral woman. It wasn't because the simpleton was evil, he just fell into the trap. It wasn't because the simpleton had his heart set on going out and getting into some trouble. It wasn't because he said, I want to just go out and ruin my life today. I want to just go ruin my life because, that's on my agenda. He doesn't do that. It's because the simpleton didn't know any better. He falls into this trap. And that's the scene for chapter 7. I encourage you to go back and look at that a little bit. Maybe it's not for your 6 or 7-year-old, but read it. It's good wisdom. It's a commentary on how easy it is to fall into the trap of immorality and to fall into the trap of adultery. But it's also a commentary on how easy it is for the simple to be led astray by folly. Folly, who, just like wisdom, is personified in Proverbs as a woman. Just find it interesting. But yes, simpletons can be easily led astray. But there's hope. Because they can also have the potential to gain wisdom and to do well in life. What we see in Proverbs is this open question. Open question to the simpleton. It says, which way will the simpleton go? The way of wisdom or the way of folly? When you're like a blank slate when you're young. You've got choices. You can go anywhere. And so what we see in Proverbs 1 through 9 are both the father and Lady Wisdom speaking to all the simpletons. And they're not just speaking to them. They're begging and pleading and warning and shouting. They're doing whatever they can to steer the simpleton toward the path of wisdom, away from the path of folly. And because the stakes are so high, this is the beginning of, you've got to get that simpleton on the right path. This is life and death. Because the simpletons, the adolescents, they don't always pick up on the nuance. They don't always pick up on the subtleties because they just don't know. Because of that, the Lady Wisdom and the father, they don't speak in riddles. In chapters 1 through 9, they don't drop hints in the first, at the beginning of Proverbs here. They can't afford to. Doing that, those are great tools for when you're talking with somebody that has some wisdom. Talking to somebody with some wisdom, you can put 2 proverbs that say the opposite next to each other, and they can figure it out. But not the simpleton. Instead, the father and Lady Wisdom, they use direct, strong, black and white language in chapters 1 through 9. Because they do not want the simpleton to get confused. They want him to hear and to know. They want him to know that you have a choice, and it's the most important choice you're ever going to make. Lady Wisdom makes her case in Proverbs chapter 1. And she also makes another speech in Proverbs chapter 8. Her first speech in chapter 1 is introduced in verse 20. Out in the open, wisdom calls aloud. She raises her voice in the public square. On top of the wall, she cries out. At the city gate, she makes her speech. Notice here that Lady Wisdom assumes the role of an open-air preacher or a prophet. She goes out where the people are. She goes out in the public place, into the square. She's not hiding. She's not, in some far-off place that you've got to search and find her. She goes out to the people. She goes to where the people are. And Lady Wisdom, she's a missionary. She's not messing around. There are no mixed messages that are going to be coming from Lady Wisdom's mouth. She gives direct communication. There's no doubt what Lady Wisdom is trying to say. She's saying, slow down or die. Moreover, she says, if you reject my counsel, if you go out and you make your life a mess, and then you come to your senses, and then you cry out to me after you've made a mess of your life, she says, too bad. Too late. I'm sorry, but no. That seems a little bit harsh, doesn't it? You're reading through there in chapter 1, you're like, you don't hear a lot of compassion in Lady Wisdom's voice in her speech. Here, she's giving a huge warning. If you don't listen to my wisdom, if you don't listen to my warning, she says, it's too bad. You know, it's like when you told your kids, you fall on that tree and you break your leg, don't come running to me about it. It's because Lady Wisdom isn't making a speech to try to tell us how to undo our mistakes. What she's doing is she's trying to prevent mistakes. Trying to keep you from making that mistake in the first place. In this speech in Proverbs, Lady Wisdom doesn't come preaching forgiveness. She comes talking about the dire consequence of being a fool. Don't be a fool. She makes another speech in Proverbs chapter 8. The introduction to that starts in verse 1. Does not wisdom call out? Does not understanding raise her voice? At the highest point along the way where the paths meet, she takes her stand. Beside the gate leading into the city, at the entrance, she cries aloud. If you slow down and you read Proverbs 8, it is, and you think about it, it is one of the most powerful poetic passages in all the Bible. There is so much going on in this poetic speech that she gives. This speech explains why we can gain wisdom by paying attention to what's going on in the world around us. Why paying attention is so important. Because Lady Wisdom was there, it says. Starting in verse 22, she explains that at the very beginning of creation, Lady Wisdom says she was born, the firstborn of all creation. She was the very first to be created. And she said she was there at God's side as an architect, as an artist working along with God at the master's side for creation. She was helping with creation. Wisdom has embedded her DNA in everything that we see. That's why there's so much wisdom all around us. That's why we can go out and watch the ants and learn something. That's why the world, creation itself, is always speaking words of wisdom to those who care to listen. Those who care to pay attention to it. Now remember, what we're reading here, Proverbs is poetry. It's making a point by using poetic language and imagery that you can see, and it uses speech to do so, to make its point. So please don't take this as some type of a wooden, literal kind of thing. Wisdom literature, literally, if you're looking at this and you're reading through it and you got Lady Wisdom, wisdom literally is not a woman, any more than God in heaven is literally a man. Right? I mean, it's poetry. You get images and metaphors that help us think about and help us try to understand things that are beyond our ability to comprehend. God's helping us to see things we can't even comprehend. This speech in chapter 8, as well as everything else that's been said before this in the first 7 chapters of Proverbs, it builds to a moment of decision. It starts with chapter 1 and it builds to a moment of decision in chapter 9. In chapter 9 of Proverbs, there's a call to action, a definitive call. There's a moment of choice for that simpleton that we've been talking to. In chapter 1 and verse 9, it goes like this. Wisdom has built her house. She has set up its 7 pillars. She has prepared her meat and mixed her wine. She has also set her table. She has sent out her servants, and she is called from the highest point of the city. Lady Wisdom's there. She's making an invitation to all. Let all who are simple come to my house. To those who have no sense, she says, come, eat my food, and drink the wine I have mixed. Leave your simple ways, and you will live. Walk in the way of insight. In the ancient world, when you would invite someone into your home and sat down at your table and gave some stranger something to eat, What you were doing, it was a way of expressing your desire for a relationship. It was a way of expressing your desire for connection. Lady Wisdom wants to have a relationship with the simpleton. She wants to connect so that the simple won't remain simple, that they can be wise. Lady Wisdom wants the simpleton to come home with her. But so does Folly. So does Dame Folly. Chapter 9 and verse 13. Folly has her own words to say. Folly is an unruly woman. She is simple and knows nothing. She sits at the door of her house on a seat at the highest point of the city, calling out to those who pass by, who go straight on their way. And then finally, Dame Folly speaks there in verse 16. Let all who are simple come to my house. To those who have no sense, she says, stolen water is sweet. Food eaten in secret is delicious. But little do they know that the dead are there, that her guests are deep in the realm of the dead. Folly, the woman personified as Folly, offers the exact same invitation to the simpleton that Lady Wisdom does. She says, come home with me and eat. I want this relationship with you. Only, she hasn't prepared a feast. She's prepared something else, something off, something depraved, something broken, something that's less than spectacular. She says, come home and eat with me. Final line in chapter 9 really says it all. Every simpleton that goes home with Dame Folly walks into a house of death. So the simpleton has to make a choice. He's come to a fork in the road. He's read, he's getting all this, first 9 chapters of Proverbs, the end of 9 chapters. There's a fork in the road. He has to make a decision. Do I go home with Lady Wisdom, or do I go home with Dame Folly? Folly or wisdom? Folly, wisdom. And you have to make a choice. We have to make a choice. It's a forced choice test. You can't, it's like one of those road signs. Either you go right or you go left. You can't go straight. There's no middle ground. As Yogi Berra said, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. Our choice boils down to this. With whom will we eat? It's a practical and an ethical question. How are you going to live your life? Are you going to be wise, or are you going to be a fool? But it's also a theological question and religious, spiritual question here. Did you notice in the readings there that both Lady Wisdom and Folly both build their houses on the highest point of the city? Now in the ancient world, people would build their temples, their houses to house their idols. They'd build those on the highest place in the city. The Israelites, they built God's temple on Mount Zion in Jerusalem, the highest point in ancient Jerusalem. Now this is kind of an obscure detail to us. We read through this and we're like, okay, whatever. But to the ancient readers, to the ones this was, originally, the first people, they would notice this. The choice between Lady Wisdom and Dame Folly is actually a choice between the living God of Israel and false gods. The idols of their neighbors. And back then, false gods, those idols, they went by the names of Molech or Baal or Dagon. But today, they go by names of things like money or sex or power. The names change, but the choice remains the same. Are we going to go with wisdom or folly? Will we worship the true and living God, or will we fear the Lord, who is the beginning of wisdom, who is the source of wisdom? Or do we go home with folly? Walk into the house of death, sit at the table with idols and non-gods. The significance of this choice is brought out by the Father. If you read it through the lens or thinking of Jesus. I mean, if you think of the ministry of Jesus as you're reading this question, these wisdom chapters here, if you look at it from a Christian point of view, through the New Testament, Jesus is described as God's wisdom in the New Testament. We don't have time to read it right now this morning. Maybe we'll read it a little bit later, but go back on your own. Read John chapter 1, or Colossians chapter 1, and read that alongside Proverbs 8. You'll notice there's some similarities there, some parallels in the way Jesus and Lady Wisdom are described. We've looked at this passage before, but remember Matthew chapter 11? Jesus has to defend himself there with some of the more scandalous aspects of his ministry. So, he's just describing what's going on to some others that are beating him up. This is what he says. Jesus says, "But wisdom is proved right by her deeds." Her deeds. Apparently, Jesus has read Proverbs. I mean, obviously he has. He's familiar with Lady Wisdom. And of course Jesus is. Because Lady Wisdom is this poetic imagery meant to describe God's wisdom on earth, right? Jesus is God's wisdom in the flesh. It's no accident that when Jesus would come across somebody, he would invite sinners into a relationship with him. In his ministry, he would often invite people to dinner, people that nobody else would invite to dinner. He would invite them to dinner. He would eat with them. He'd want this relationship, this connection. It was no coincidence that when Jesus talks about the kingdom of God, that this new, amazing thing that God's doing in the world, one of the images that Jesus used to talk about the kingdom is a banquet. Like a feast or a meal where people would come. They'd sit around this table and they'd grow and they would learn and they would connect. How appropriate is it that in one of Jesus' teachings, Jesus says that there are these two paths. One path is wide. One path is easy to find. The other path, is different. One takes you to death and destruction, but the other path is narrow. And those who find it and follow it, that narrow path, they discover life. When we start making these connections, we start connecting these dots, we see that Lady Wisdom's invitation to her house is a precursor to Jesus' invitation to each of us. It's very similar language. To eat with Lady Wisdom is to follow Jesus. Jesus, the perfect embodiment of God's wisdom on earth. To choose between Lady Wisdom and folly, it's a choice between the living God and the modern day false gods. That is the choice of wisdom. The modern day gods of money and power and others like that. It's a choice between Christ, who is God's wisdom that holds all of creation together. Colossians chapter 1, you can find right there. Christ, he holds everything together, and it's choosing between the forces of evil that seek to tear the world apart. That's the simpleton's choice. This choice makes all the difference in life. This is our choice to make. And we make it every day of our lives. We make it all the time. Will we eat with Jesus, or will we dine with the devil? One way leads to useful wisdom, and a blessed and an abundant life. The other one leads to ruin, leads to disaster and death. So what will it be? Which will it be? What path are we going to walk down? Whose house are we going to go to? With whom are you going to eat? If you hear the word of the Lord this morning, and you're thinking, that's an easy answer, isn't it? I can choose death or I can choose life. Why would I ever choose death? Why would I do it? If you're thinking, obviously, I want to go to Lady Wisdom's house, which means I want to follow Jesus. I want to grow in wisdom. I want to be connected with that wisdom that is from the beginning. I want it living in me. I want that. I want to live. I don't want to die. If you don't really know exactly what that means in your life, I know in the past weeks we've been talking about this, where somebody will give you some wisdom, and you're like, that is good wisdom. I have no idea what to do with that. Because they'll give you some wisdom and you don't know how to apply it. You're like, I don't know, and it takes you years. We don't want to do that with this. It's too important. If you don't know how to get on the path of wisdom, you got to talk to somebody. You got to say, what does this wisdom mean to me? How do I apply this to my life? I don't know exactly what it means to follow Jesus, specifically. Find an older, wiser person here that you trust, and start to follow Jesus. Find out what it means to humbly come before Christ and submit your life to Jesus. The Bible talks about baptism. It says when you come to Christ, you allow yourself to be baptized, and the Holy Spirit comes and lives within you. There's all these things. It's the beginning of wisdom. That's what it is. It's saying, Lord, I'm not going this other way. You're saying, I want to be at your house. I want to sit at your table. I want what you have to offer me. But maybe that's not where you're at today. Maybe you're somewhere else. And you're taking this wisdom thing, and I don't know what to do with it. Find somebody. You can talk with one of the elders. You can talk with myself, Roy, Bible class teachers, older ladies, somebody wiser, older than you. Visit with them about that. The point is, don't leave this place today without making the commitment in your heart and in your actions and in your words that you're going down this path. You're at the fork in the road. Wisdom, life, or death. Is that clear? Make the decision. Which way are you going to go? Let your choice be made known anytime or now as we stand and sing the song.